All right, welcome to this episode of the Grand Campaign. We're 6 episodes in. It's kind of hard to believe. So today on the Grand Campaign, we're going to be talking about, we're going to continue our talk about management, about resources. We're talking about time in this episode. And why we're talking about time is because game time is of an utmost importance. Failure to keep careful track of time expenditure by player characters will result in many anomalies in the game. The stricture of time is what makes the recovery of hit points meaningful.
I thought that you're just supposed to take rests and recover hit points.
I thought you were gonna read that in all caps.
Yeah, this is actually not the all caps quote. This is not the quote. I have to pull up the quote.
Okay,
now.
well, you can correct me.
So everyone knows, John Matthew is the one who put our show notes together,
and I did not put this quote in all
fucking
caps.
Job.
That's right.
So,
That's right. So yeah, rests are fine, but in a grand campaign, timing and pacing is very important. Richard's tour game I hold up as kind of an exemplar of
okay, here
this
we go.
ebb and
You ready?
flow. Yeah, go for it.
You cannot have a meaningful campaign if strict time records are not kept. It's in all caps.
It is in all caps because it was important.
Said Gygax.
And the other thing that Gygax
Also Zarathustra, but most people don't know.
nobody talked.
Yeah,
that was
rated D&D.
I just read The Last Hero by Terry Pratchett.
Yeah,
And my favorite part about that is they keep correcting the bard when he's writing their saga. He's like, well, and then Richard says, he's like, no, I spake it.
yeah.
People spake it in bards. Oh, or in sagas. Oh,
Yes.
all right. Yes. The other weird thing that we kind of talked about is Gygax also had 1 hour of game time was 1 hour of real time.
Yeah, that's.
And if you missed 5 days of a campaign, like you didn't play, you missed 5 days. Your characters were off doing weird things for 5 days.
It would be useful to actually talk about what the context for this, which is
go for it.
Gygax's play group played every day, and these are long, sometimes 10-hour sessions.
Yeah.
How is my question, but I mean, this is what he did. This is all he did.
Yeah.
And so, they played every day for long amounts of, so when you're playing that much, and this is a thing to remember, and this is something I've been trying to work my way through, because I'm getting ready to, so my Emboria campaign is wrapping up in a few more sessions, which is fine.
Yeah, no.
It's great.
It's a great game.
I had to I don't know if I talked about this. I had to retool. I had to kind of speed up the ending of the campaign a little bit because I had, several players decide to all get married at the same time, not to each other.
That would be really weird.
Since they're siblings,
yeah,
that would be very strange. Yeah, but no, 2 of our players, my brother and my sister, both have weddings, and because there's the expensive relatives flying in from out of town and stuff, they said, well, we'll just do them the same week. That way, people only have to fly out once, get hotels once, etc. And so that's all great, but it also means that suddenly half of my play group is gone. So. I hope that, at some point they'll decide they want to come back and game with me. But in the meantime, they have to go start life and whatever. So I said, well, it's okay. We'll just,
they didn't start it 20 years ago like I did.
Right.
Clearly preparing for this day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had to compress some things. So we have about 3 or 4 more sessions max left in the Emboria campaign. So I just want to run. I've always wanted to do. We talked about this. We both always wanted to do the Big Axe campaign, and so I'm going to try to start that.
Complete side note, but when you go to Domains of War, if you do that, I have the big map printed
Yeah.
Or I have an extra one of these that you can just draw your map on.
I'll probably just come over here and use your stuff.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Seriously, if I'm not playing, you're more than welcome.
Well, you have to come play with us
I would love to.
I know that you've got other things going on.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
You can also move down here and play with us.
Yeah, Josh, just come on down.
Well, I'll be down in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll be recording the next session.
Oh, right on.
All of us here.
Oh, yeah,
and then we'll get the game in while you're here.
That'll be fun. Yeah.
So yeah,
we'll get an entire grand campaign in while you're here.
Yeah, just one. We won't. Grace will just have to go do stuff with
Just
Trista.
speed times 100 speed.
That's right.
Grace is already anticipating, JM, that you and I are just going to sequester ourselves somewhere and
It'd be
talk
like
about
once an hour.
time, so.
Once an hour is generations over your character dice make a new one.
So what's interesting,
That would actually be amazing.
we'll take a little digression here, but one of the interesting things is if you actually study Gygax's original group, some of the weird things about AD&D make way more sense.
Yeah.
Like the role of the mapper and the caller. So the caller was a role in AD&D where basically, Josh, you would be the leader of the group, and the group would discuss what they would do, and the DM would not respond to any of it until Josh, the caller, announced what the group was going to do. And apparently, in the original dungeon basement that Gygax was running this in, Gygax was like behind filing cabinets.
Yes.
No one could see him.
Yes.
So the caller would call out, and then this voice would arise from behind the curtain and describe what was going on. So there were no table maps. There were no... It wasn't like you could see Gygax. You had to respond to Oz the Great and Terrible.
Yeah.
Which we're not. I mean, someday that's how we'll run our game.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean,
that sounds amazing because
yeah,
I end up in a situation a lot of times where the players will have a discussion, all kinds of things. We should do this, then, and blah 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 blah, and then the conversation will just kind of trail off. And I'll just sit there, and then they'll kind of look at me, and I'm like, "What? You? At no point did anybody."
This is what I want
if I
to
feel
do.
like the players are talking too much, I'll just start rolling a die. I'll just start like rolling a random encounter. Be like, all right, no, you took too long. Yeah. But I was going to kind of bring things back around. The original context does help to know, especially if you're looking at running like old school D&D or some clone thereof. So I'm looking at doing X.
Yeah.
The XP economy in old school games assumes that you are playing every day.
Yeah.
So if you're not playing every day, then you're going to have to maybe make a few adjustments if you want a similar play experience. But regardless of that, keeping track of time, whether you're playing weekly or daily or every other week or whatever, keeping track of time is of the utmost importance.
So let's start with Josh, and then we'll kick it over to Richard. So why do you think, Josh, in your Gembercan game, that time management, this idea of keeping careful records, both on the PC side and on the GM side, or maybe either or, why is that so important to this idea of our grand campaign?
Because I guess on a large scale, in a grand campaign, right, we're putting so much time into the setting and the environment, and it's a living world. So things are happening without the players. And if you want them to have the illusion of, right, a living, well, maybe not an illusion, but if you want them to feel that this is a living world, then things have to happen. Without them and independent of them. So on a large scale, stuff is happening in the world. Things that are going to make it possible or impossible to go and do this one thing that you wanted to do, or travel somewhere. Right, and that matters if you're running a large world, a grand campaign. On a smaller scale, I think it's probably because I think a large part of it is all of their abilities are keyed off of time. Right. Everything is in terms of rounds or short rests or long rests. Right. This is 5th edition.
Seasons in RuneQuest.
Yeah. So if you're not keeping track of time, you're not keeping track of what they can do. Which means it's really difficult to get any moments of genuine tension, because if they can just go Nova, I think that's the term, right? If everybody can just blast off all of their highest abilities whenever they need to, you never get to those moments of, oh God, we are out of this kind of thing, and there's still more that we have to do. And so then you start getting really meaningful choices.
And it also is interesting, kind of even just hearing Josh talk about this, and as you and I have been talking a lot about the old school experience for basically the last 7 years of our friendship. The Wizard Workday didn't really develop until late 2nd edition or early 3rd edition, because it wasn't just like, oh, I'm out of my spells, everybody let's nap for 8 hours. Because you couldn't do that, because time was a resource that had to be managed.
Yeah, so I have like 4 thoughts all trying to like Three Stooges.
Yeah, get through the door at the same time.
Yeah.
That was like me in comments last night.
Yeah.
It's like they're all trying to come out of my mouth at the same time, and that probably means I should not say any of them.
So in let's say just like old school D&D, you know, whether like it's like actual like 1E 2E or
it's E
or you know, any retro clone. Time is going to always be measured in a certain way. So like, for instance, if you're running like BNX or Axe or something like that, time is measured basically based on the pace of movement through the dungeon, right? So in fact, for Axe, they make these great little sheets. So as you're moving through the dungeon, they've moved 100 feet. That's 1 time increment. 6 of those is an hour.
You have to rest 1 time increment every six turns, or else.
Right, you got to take little breaks. And in the meantime, what's happening? Your torches are running out. Any spells that are like time dependent. Like, when's the last time? Let's be honest with ourselves here. When's the last time anyone running 5e was like, oh, by the way, your light cantrip ran out 10 minutes ago, and you need to like, you know, refresh that or something. Like, nobody cares. Like,
or once you hit like certain levels, mage armor lasts half a day.
Yeah. And I mean, the nice thing about this, and obviously, you know, something like Tor or RuneQuest is a different experience because you're still keeping track of time, but you're keeping track of time like seasonally, which is another thing to talk about. But just starting out, like focusing on like the dungeon experience. One of my big pet peeves back in the day running and playing Pathfinder, which is my first D20 game. It's like old Pathfinder. I have to say that now because there's a new Pathfinder or whatever, you know. But one of my biggest frustrations was exactly what you said, like we're going to go Nova on the first thing. So it's like, okay, if I really want to challenge these players, I have to give them at least 3 encounters a day. Well, then the math starts assuming you're going to get at least 3 encounters per day. And so then like all the game math, and it becomes this, we were talking about this the other day, it's recursive design. Where it's like, well, okay, people are expecting 3 encounters a day, so now we're going to write encounter math that says you get, 2, an easy, a medium, and a hard, or 2 mediums and a hard, or whatever, like a day, and then you're getting XP from those encounters, so you're leveling up. And if you start to think about it, like the average D&D campaign, actually in-game world, in the in-game timeline, the average D&D campaign of 1 to 20 plays out over something like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, in 4 weeks you went from being like this peasant to ascending to godhood, and I mean, that's fine. I'm not, it just irritates me, that's all, I
will say one of the interesting things, oh, sorry, go ahead, Josh.
No, I was just going to say that was, that experience was what led to, I think, the first time I started deciding I need to change mechanics in 5th edition.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at the relative power of my players and a town guard, and I went, hold on, it's been a week. How in the space of a week, first of all, did the wizard learn all of that stuff?
Right.
You've been in a tent.
Well, wizards shouldn't be able to learn spells when they level up anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
this is a different rant. It's a different rant.
I will say, but Josh, one of the things that because we're gearing up to play a 2E game when we do our TPK.
By the way, no one has called me about like making characters.
Oh, hey, we should do that.
Doing a solo before the thing.
Yeah, we should totally do that this week. Well, Ben has
that's fun.
Up. We'll just have you guys over. We'll do that. It was something like to rememorize a spell was 1 hour per spell level. So if you go Nova, your wizard is literally out for a week rememorizing their spells.
Yeah.
And additionally, it's why high-level wizards don't get in duels. Because if you and I get in a duel and I blow 3 9th and 7 8th level spells,
that's it.
I am out for a month just trying to recoup my power.
Now, I understand if somebody out there is thinking, man, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't want to. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
The point is that keeping track of time makes decisions about resources meaningful.
Yes.
And the trend in modern game design, D20 has always been a resource management game.
Yeah.
At least for the Wizard, it was always a resource management game. Current trend in modern game design is to make basically every player a wizard in terms of, 4E really did this.
Yeah.
But then, like 5E does this too, where like everybody's you've got your daily abilities.
You
got these things, right? These things that recharge. You can do this so many times, and that's fine.
Yeah, we all enjoy
it.
Right.
Yeah, right. But the thing to keep in mind is that if you're not keeping careful track of time, then that goes away.
Yeah.
And there's like a weird thing that's happening now, especially in like the 5e world, where they're keeping that element, but they're like taking away the actual time tracking, and so then it's like, well, now you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah, it breaks down some of the core assumptions that are still in there.
Right.
It's sort of like, and remind me to come back to the Pathfinder thing real quick, and then we'll go into pacing. But it's sort of like, and this is, I may just vent Richard's spleen here with this, but it's sort of like when, was it Nick Snyder took over Captain America and made Captain America Hydra from the beginning.
Right.
He's been it was that I don't understand where this is coming from.
Right.
I've just been in this recursive design loop for so long that this makes sense without understanding why this would undermine.
I don't know, like, why you decided to go with the most frustrating example of that, but
I will say in Pathfinder 2, two of the adventure paths that they have, the one that you and I played, Josh, that we started, the Extinction Curse, where you're playing a circus group, and then the new one, Strength of Thousands, which is their essentially like African magical Hogwarts, like School of Magic. The time management is very important. And in fact, you start at level 1 as students and you go up to becoming teachers, but they have giant downtime gaps between where it's like, hey, you need to work on your magical thesis. So here's the downtime actions that you guys
been
can
there.
do. Yeah, we've all been there. So what I'm hearing everyone say is, in addition to, we like some of the older ways of time management, but it also encourages pacing in the game, which is very important for the Grand Campaign, because the Grand Campaign is not about one character. It's about the arc of a generation.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like that? We'll start with Richard, then I'll kick it over to Josh. How do you feel like the time management and constantly putting the time in front of players?
Yeah.
Like, I'll understand, like, in the moment, it's an Alfred Hitchcockism that I love. 2 people sitting at a table is boring. 2 people sitting at a table when the audience knows there's a bomb under it, suddenly you have drama.
Right.
And so if you say, we had this in my RuneQuest game, you guys have 4 things to get done before you get married in 3 seasons, and you can only do 1 thing a season. Suddenly the tension's ramped up and that was the first time that they were like, can we split the party? Can we get additional characters? Can we start adding in new character groups? Yes, that's the whole point. But in the short term, you add tension. But in the long term, how does this pacing really reinforce the ideals of the Grand Campaign?
Okay, so an implicit assumption for me of running a Grand Campaign is that whatever your time increment is, and I've done quarterly time increments, like seasonal time increments, and I've done 6-month time increments, like winter and spring. And what I found is that I think the flow of winter and spring works better.
Okay.
So the idea that there's an adventuring season, or as they would say, like, if you've ever read any military history, and I know every single dad in the audience has read military history. Happy Father's Day.
Yeah.
There's a campaigning season, and then there's winter quarters, right?
Yeah. Or if you go back to like Samuel, it's the time when kings go to war.
Right.
That's something that goes into all ancient Near East stories.
Yeah.
The time when kings go to war.
Right. Everybody knows. It was like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
It's that time again. So I having run both, what I found that works better for the Great Campaign, at least my vision of it, is that one season on, one season off kind of a thing, which doesn't mean that you don't have an adventure during the down season, but it's like it's different in character, travel's more difficult, things like that. So that basically the idea is whatever your time increment is, you get one adventure for that increment. And we'll see how this plays out in Acts. I've got some ideas about how to kind of integrate it. But part of this is just like a question of like verisimilitude. You could not actually constantly adventure all the time. You would A, probably die. B, like the stress, the PTSD, the, you know, like, I mean, to be honest, like now we're like, oh, I made one phone call, I deserve a wine now. You know, it's just like, so the idea that your adventurer could just be like constantly adventuring, 3 encounters a day, levels 1 to 20 in 2 weeks or whatever, like that is, you know, if you want to suspend your disbelief and have an experience, that's great, but that's not the grand campaign. So what I found worked really well in terms of pacing is we had a spring adventuring season and then a winter adventuring season. And sometimes it would be shifted a little bit. So it would be like summer and fall or something like that, kind of depending on what the needs of the campaign were. But basically what that meant is you have about 2 adventures per year. You have about 2 adventures per year. Sometimes I would stretch it out because, and basically one of those adventures might be really long. So you'd really get the equivalent of like 3 or 4 a year. It would just depend on what the group needed and what the story called for. Now that was in Tor, which is a kind of like a more narrative system. I think that if I was doing this with a D20 system, like Acts, I mean, the key thing here, the secret sauce in Gary's little quote here is he says, the stricture of time is what makes the recovery of hit points meaningful. If you're running old school D&D, the recovery of hit points bakes in your downtime. Like, how many adventures can you go on? How many hit points do you have? That's the answer to the question, because you're going to recover like 1d3 hit points a day. And I personally roll a lot of ones. So, so that's... So kind of like, there you go. And like, it's, you know, like the more you level up, the more powerful you become, the more hit points you have. If you are running adventures that are at difficulty for your level, you're still whittling those hit points down, but now it's going to take you even longer to recover them. So I think that if you just had, and like, if I was going to like, tomorrow, my play group was like, oh man, we just want to play 5e. We want to play it so bad. Because 5e is the greatest moral self-improvement system that's ever been designed for human beings. You know, if someone would just wanted to play 5e so bad, I would say, okay, we're going to play 5e, but we're going to do old school hit point recovery. And that's the only change we're going to make. I think that would just be a radically different game. So
Josh, what about you? How do you handle that? Because that's a really good point. Because it's actually...
Watch this power move right
That's
here.
right. You're pouring your coffee into your
pouring
ice.
my coffee onto my extra ice. Making iced coffee.
I know. As we sit here, he's a man of many talents. Now, so Josh, you and I have talked a lot about Gebercan, and one of the ways that you control pacing is through strict travel time.
Yeah, that's another good way to do it.
Like, how have you incorporated this into? I know your current campaign is very focused on this isolated cities scattered throughout this region that is very difficult and time-consuming and possibly even Fey-like to travel between. Like, if you step off the road, suddenly you're in Dark Fairyland, and now I have Dark Fairyland to the tune of Lunch Lady Land going in my head. We should write that song. So how have you been doing that?
So the question is, how have I just been managing time, or how does travel fit into?
How have you been managing time, and how does travel fit into that?
I've mostly, I haven't touched the time too much, other than to make it so that to level up, you must return to some safe, secure place, and spend a week training. And you have to spend at least half of each day training, and weeks are 9 days long.
Okay.
So that's most of the time that I've plugged in, and that has helped quite a bit just for my own personal verisimilitude,
Mhm.
because I look at downtime as the opportunity to capitalize on your successes in the adventure and make them lasting and permanent, right?
Mhm.
Or like heal from
So
the
you-
devastating psychological damage.
Sure. Also
That's what I like to do.
For me though, right, it's great. You killed the tyrant. He's been overthrown. Guess what? If you think it's done, right? It's it's just gonna get worse, right? If you find you've removed the evil tyrant and then you just kind of go on your merry way and expect to come back and find that things have improved, you have forgotten that you guys are the heroes and you left in a time of crisis.
Mhm.
Things are not better. Right? Somebody else has just taken his place, or now there's horrific factions going on. Yeah. So I like longer downtime because that's when, as a player, I think I would really want to change the world, and that's what I look to for my players to actually change things, which is important in Geberkan because it's falling apart
Right.
at all spots at all times, and so for players to say, "Great, we've removed this obstacle. I'm now going to replace it with a group of people dedicated to solving this problem," and then they institute that and set it up. Right, that is really cool. Travel becomes important because the cities are so far apart, and every hour of travel has like a 10% chance of a deadly encounter where one or more people is probably going to die. And
if I may
Yeah,
interject real quick, one of the things that I love that Josh changed in his 5e game is that you can, as player characters, you can expend hit dice to avoid encounters while traveling. So you are literally dropping your resources to not have to do the easy or the medium difficulty fights, but it still is expending the resources. So it's still
that's cool.
like a slog.
I think that.
The slog of slogs.
The part of the reason this slog is, oh god, no.
How often do you get this?
Damn, I did not need to be in that headspace today. No, but what I love, you had hit dice, which were I don't know, I felt like underused. This really cool thing to simulate an idea, and that idea is used really only in short.
It's used only for free healing.
That's right.
Well, so what I did was you don't skip the encounter. Basically I have rolled an encounter and I just quickly narrate how it goes, and expending the hit dice is simulating, yeah, we took some damage and we defeated those things, and you still get to loot the corpses.
Yeah.
But it makes it so that a week of travel isn't
a month of game time.
10 sessions of just combat encounters.
Right.
Anything where it's unlikely for somebody to die, you spend hit dice, we pretend that combat happened, you get to loot from it, and then you keep going, and then a hard or a deadly encounter, you don't get to do that. We play those out.
To continue singing the praises of Tor, the travel subsystem in Tor is probably the best that I've ever encountered in any game. It's so great. And one of the things that I love about it is that, because, travel is a big deal in Tolkien's works. This is why half of the Lord of the Rings films are just,
montages of people
walking. Most of the book is just montages of people walking.
I don't need anything more.
I have no problem with this. I don't have a problem with this. But in a Tor campaign, there are places where, and it's usually the places you need to get through or get around or get into, where literally just going there, even if you don't have a single fight, literally just going there might make you so sad you die.
Yeah.
Like that's how dangerous travel is. And it was one of my favorite things because you could sort of use that and present people as like, okay, well, here's an election for a new war leader that you want to stop, but you need some evidence to stop the election at this point, and you know where that evidence is, but it's a 2-week round trip through Mirkwood.
Do you want to do this?
So, and you probably won't be back in time to stop the election if you get the evidence, and like there's a cost to the travel, and like all these things. Like, but the thing is, like, that's not me arbitrarily saying it's going to take you this long. It's saying, well, it's here on the map. You all know how long it takes to travel from point A to point B through the forest and everything else, because that's been well established. Like it always takes the same amount of time to get from point A to point B. And so what it would do is it would make, there really was a cost in, even if there wasn't a fight, there was always a cost. You could pick up corruption, you get worn out, you'd add encumbrance, you could get weary, things like this that would really sap your ability to function at the journey's end. I guess one question that I'm sort of curious about, Josh, is like, when do you get those hit dice back? Do you get them back at the end of the trip? Or do you get them back, like in Tor, you can't remove encumbrance until you get to a safe place, like an actual settlement and rest.
Yeah, a bastion of law and jackals.
The way 5th edition is, right, say you've got 10 maximum hit dice. If you spend all of those in a day, you would get 5 back. So you get half of your maximum.
Oh, okay, right. Gotcha.
Short rest.
Yeah.
I altered it because
that's too fast.
It becomes, well, no, I actually didn't slow it down, right? Because for a week of travel, you're going to, right, the first day, great, you get to skip like 5 or 6 encounters if you spend all 10 hit dice. Right, skipping a hard encounter is 4 hit dice, so you could skip 2 of those and a medium or something. But I altered it so that just to make there to be more of an aspect to managing your resources. If you live it up for a day or two before you travel, right? Let's say you spend a whole week, so 9 days of just living it up. You're eating at the best restaurants. You're taking just long, luxurious baths every night, right? Just
carouse.
I always like to go on a big bender before a trip.
Yeah, right.
Really sets me up.
Then for as many days as you did that, you regain all of your hit dice back on a long rest.
Okay.
Right? So if you live it up for 3 days, then for the first 3 days in the wilderness, you get all 10 back when you do a long rest. And then you start
the attrition kicks in.
It gives the players, right, more resource to manage where they go, well, hold on, right? It's a 5-day trip and we're not going to survive because we've all only got 5 hit dice maximum. So we'll skip an encounter and then get killed by the next 5. So we need to build in time to live it up so that we can actually have a better chance of survival there. So that's one place where I actually made it a little bit more forgiving.
But you also added a new resource cost to that because they have to be able to spend the lifestyle cost to live it up. Now, one thing I wanted to chat about before we kind of bring an episode to a close is, here's the thing that I love about time management, especially in a grand campaign. As Richard and Josh have been saying, in a 5e game, you're usually going from crisis to crisis to crisis and leveling up in 6 to 12 weeks. When you have planned downtime, so like Jackals, because I'm going to shill for Jackals because it's my game, right? Where you have 2 adventures a season and then you have to do downtime.
Wait, you
wrote Jackals. Yeah. Or in Tor, where you're doing one. Your players become far less reactionary. As a player, you're not necessarily moving from crisis to crisis. What's the next dungeon we have to do? What's the next response? Hey, after this adventure, I've got time. I'll take my downtime actions, whether it's seasonal actions in Jackals, downtime actions in Tor, downtime actions in Pathfinder 2. Or let's just be honest, Pathfinder 1 has so many supplements. I'm sure Ultimate Campaign had I'm
sure there's a book called Ultimate Downtime Actions.
Yeah.
In 2.
Yeah, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Or whatever, RuneQuest seasonal actions. But it basically puts a mental break for the player, for their character, and say, okay, you don't have to jump to the next crisis. You've gone back to take care of your cattle at the Tula. What do you want to do next?
And so this is something I wanted to say to kind of close out the section, is that if you design good downtime actions, this is one of the most powerful ways to give your players, going back to what we talked about for the Great Campaign, your players have to have a stake in the world, and specifically they need to have a stake in the community that the campaign is kind of centered around or building out of. One of the most powerful ways to do this is just to create good downtime actions that give them some options, like to put down roots, to build up. But you can also like sneak in some really beautiful world building stuff this way. So when I've been running Emboria, for the second half of the campaign, we were using a hack that I put together of Clash. And what I did is I looked at the downtime actions that you put together for Clash, and I said, so these will work, but there's some implicit assumptions of the world under Starlight which are not present here, which I would like to be here. And so I came up with like a 30-page document of here are more downtime actions. And there are things like, one thing that's really important is like the theater. Is a very important part of Emborian culture. And so I said, well, listen, you can, if somebody wanted to decide they wanted to run a troupe of thespians or to like run a theater or to be a playwright, and like find somebody else to like, here, put my play on and things like this. So there's a little table for determining like what's in style this season. Is it drama or comedy? And you don't know that until like after you write it. So it's like, oh, I put a drama together. Oh, sorry, drama's not really in style. This is not going to be like, you can run your play, but it's not going to do well financially, kind of a thing. Yeah. But this got really fiddly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
As homebrew stuff always gets fiddly. But so for my players, what this meant was like, one of them was like, oh, I really want to start. I got this boat, I got this ship. I want to start a merchant endeavor. Sadly, his vessel sank at sea. But on this during the session that he wasn't there, which is kind of insult to injury. But and another one said, well, I want to start a scriptorium and like hire other scribes and things like this. And so people were able to start doing like a little bit of domain management. It's a nice way to kind of sneak that in. But you can do like a lot of. Here's the thing that I'm trying to say. The downtime options that you give your players will signal to them what is important about the world and how can I interact with it. Yeah. So if you don't put something on there, then what that's implicitly telling them is, oh, that must not be a thing here, or that must not really be that important. Because they're really usually going to only choose, like, unless you have like that annoying player who's like, well, listen, here's 30 more pages of downtime options. Would you please let me do one of these? And I do have players who often ask, well, I actually want to do this. I'm like, okay, well, let me write a thing for that.
Yeah, exactly.
But typically speaking, the typical player, they're going to look at the options given them and they're going to say, so like, if you only had the downtime options in the 5e DM's guide, which are pretty lame. Like if you only had those options, then you would look at it and think, oh, downtime is not that important.
Yes.
Because these are all very little small things that give you like one inspiration on your next roll or like whatever. So if you have good if you have good meaty downtime options, then that tells the players downtime matters, the time between adventures matters, and this is actually a time, like Josh said, when I can capitalize on really putting down roots into the world and actually making something out of this thing that I just saved.
Yeah. I'm running my Jackals game, and I've created like 9 new downtime options just because the group is dealing with trying to establish a colony.
Oh, nice.
Like help this colony survive. And so we've got downtime actions for gathering herbs because a bunch of people gather those strange herbs that are growing in this part of the world and see what they can do with it. Everything they do, we have a new one called Monument for the Dead that they establish, where basically if you make this plinth and you keep a record of the dead, it increases it gives advancements to new jackals because they've heard, hey, there's this thing that's happening and it's drawing like better quality jackals to the area.
That's cool.
And I've got rules now for how well is the colony doing? Like, if it drops below a certain point, the thing's going to dissolve. If it gets
that's like its own mini game.
It is. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So Josh, have you created any downtime actions? It sounds like you have. And here's the best part about downtime actions, as Richard just pointed out. This is the sneaky thing about being a grand campaign GM. You don't need all of them at the start. You need
Right.
just enough for your players to engage with, and they will start going, well, could I do this?
Right.
Could I make a magic item?
Right.
Well, let's
Yes,
talk about
you
that.
need 2,000 ogre skulls.
That's right.
Get back to me.
Yes. So have you made any downtime actions for Geberkan? Because it sounds like you've done the training rules. Are there any other ones that you've created or thought about creating? Because I know you're working on Telos, kind of your own, and I've looked at some of the mechanics, and I'm very excited about it. I need to send you my feedback on that.
I have not presented any to my current players. I gave them, so when we did session 0, which took 2 full sessions because of the scale of the changes I had made to 5th edition, I hadn't created any yet, and I've been trying to avoid my design of my own system spilling into it. So every week there's a new, okay guys, by the way, here's a new set of, because I want to maintain some consistency for them to keep track of. But I have I am brainstorming quite a few, and this is one of those things, JM, I do this all the time, where I'll sit down and say, oh, this is really cool, and I'll start to write out the mechanic, and then I'll realize, oh, hold on, this is just jackals.
Yes.
It's fun. But some of those things that I think would work well as one player who wants to go and do this one thing that you could do an adventure for, or you could just do some downtime so that they can get through that, and with while other players can also do their own thing. So it's you'll get a certain number of downtime actions per downtime that you can reallocate, and there are things like maintain contacts in one organization, right? So if you don't spend downtime actions there, your influence and your relationships and your contacts there start to degrade. Training would be based on downtime, or one other is research a topic or a question. So if there have been little hints or hooks over the course of an adventure, and players keep trying to hit up a library, great. That's going to take a little bit more time than you have in this adventure. So unless you plop down with your stack of tomes and skip the rest of the adventure, here's some quick information that you could get from skimming. But if you really wanted to sit, and then that tells me, if a player decides to do that, then I can sit down and start building out all of these full things that they get to then discover. Right. So if they go,
Tor had a discover secrets or a research.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
sorry. Tor had a discover secrets or a research fellowship phase option.
Yeah.
Which ended up being one of the most used, because it was we got all these clues. Let's spend the winter researching those. So
yeah. Well, because if they've got a problem on their hands and they've run out of ideas for how to approach it, use that downtime action. Hey, I want to research this thing. I want to know if there's a star that has ever gone down on this half of the continent that we could go find and forge into something cool. We keep coming across this name. I want to find out about it. And that, what I like about that one too is that will basically, that action I think will determine, or at least determine the scope of the next adventure, right?
Yes.
Where are they going next? Well, they're about to generate their own story hooks because they spent a resource to get this information. They're gonna pursue it.
They are invested, and it also goes back to this not being reactionary. As the GM, if your player goes, hey, man, okay, stop. We got to make sure we research this during downtime. Suddenly you as the GM have a clear focal point on what you should be designing world-wise or refining world-wise, because the players want to know more about this. So you don't have to come up with something in the moment. You can say, that's a research thing. I've got 2 weeks to come up with the actual, the poetry in Richard's case or the lore in our cases.
Well, it's a way, and it's a way for the GM to figure out what are my players interested in, right? Where is their attention, right, starting to go? Great, time to invest heavily in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I'm trying to design a system where you start as a fisherman, and whatever you create is what you create. There's no classes or anything. So a lot of my downtime actions have to do with training and creating specific. Right, if every character would be fairly unique if you just have this huge array of options. But a lot of the training is also dependent on your contacts with certain organizations. So you have to spend some of your tokens maintaining contacts with this organization. And if you get your influence there high enough, then yeah, you could spend a downtime gaining a really cool feat. And you only got that feat because you invested in this part of the world, and then you trained there. And so yes, because you did all of that, you can train this feat.
So what you just described, Josh,
yeah, what's that?
What you just described, Josh, would be such an easy way to fix 5e or Pathfinder or something like that. When I say fix it, I mean adapt it for the grand campaign.
Right. Yeah.
Where yes. very simply, any new abilities, including spells or feats, or as a bonus action, you do a backflip and snap the bad guy's neck and save the day abilities.
Yeah.
All those things that you unlocked when you leveled up, you don't get them. You've got to take downtime actions, training that new ability. If you're a wizard, that means I got to go train with another wizard who's going to teach me how to use this spell. If you're a sorcerer, it's I've got to go out into the woods where I'm not going to hurt anybody and actually figure out how to channel this new magical, urge that I'm dealing with. If you're a fighter, it's as simple as I've got a new technique that I've learned. I didn't just suddenly come up with that while I was running around the dungeon. This might be a cool thing, but I need to go drill this. And so you say, well, you've got these abilities you unlocked at this level, and it's a downtime action to unlock one.
Yeah. And what's also interesting is most of the campaign systems that we've been talking about, so Jackals, Tor, RuneQuest, kind of the games that we're saying are geared towards a grand campaign, not the only ones to do. Axe, old school D&D.
Right.
You don't get your XP, you don't get your advancements
until you get back to town.
Until you get back to town.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you've earned enough XP.
Right.
Right. If you go old school, Axe, again 2E, it's only the people who make it back to town alive.
Right.
That's how you divide the shares.
Right.
So if you kill a dragon and Josh's character dies on the way back to town, Josh doesn't get a share of that adventure's XP, which did cause in olden times some people to capitalize on this and maybe hamstring a character on the way back. I have had that happen. I've had it suggested, and I'm like, no, this is not the way we're running this.
Not the culture we're trying to cultivate at the table.
But also, if you look at some of the old inspirational stories, why this pacing is important is look at Conan. The Conan adventures always start because Conan lost or spent all of the treasure he got on the last adventure. He always came to the new story hungry for what lay ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that also adds, well, why would I just keep going out when I've got 9,000 gold pieces that I just ripped out of this, giant slayer? Well, in all honesty, no one in a D20 world would continue after that. 9,000 gold pieces sets you and your family up for life.
Or 9,000 families up for 1 year.
That's true. I don't know that. I have not met any player that altruistic. Even the best paladin, I would not have had him go into a town and go, well, do not worry, peasants. You can have the year off. It is a year of Jubilee.
The year is on me.
The whole year is on me. Although if someone did that, I would probably reward them so well.
I think if somebody did that, I'd be like, okay, well, you get double XP for your treasure, and they build a statue of you. You're a god now.
That's right. You gotta. Then the rest of the players can be like, we need to go to the crappy town where I'm worshipped as a hero. So Any final thoughts on time management or pacing? Any things that you guys want to recap or just point out as here for a GM or a player, here's why this is important?
So this is just like a little pro tip. So I sent you guys my Clash Emboria downtime actions, and looking at them, some of these I'm like, gosh, this is a whole mini game between you and the player, which is, to me that's a feature, not a bug. Downtime stuff can often be done. I mean, look at some of the stuff on there. It's like it's insanely specific.
Can't wait.
It's insanely specific. Downtime stuff can be done asynchronously. Like if you don't want to take up time at the table, which I understand, like, some of us have kids and things like that, our time is a little limited. That's a great thing to do on the Discord, or like if you have a message board or something else like that with your players, where it's like, okay, good game, everybody. We got to the end of the adventure. We got back to town. We'll discuss downtime on Discord, and I'll see you again in a week.
Yeah.
And then, and the nice thing is that throughout the week that keeps the players engaged.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is a wonderful benefit.
Yeah, but you can only do it if you bought a very expensive and mature game from.
Josh, any final comments before I go on a rant that I don't want recorded?
I don't have too much to add because this is all something that I'm currently in the middle of like brainstorming and trying to figure out for myself. So I wouldn't be confident in too much of what I say. Other than I love the idea of designing things so that at the beginning of the adventure the players are hungry, right? That
yes.
The downtime, you get some stuff from it, but also you have run out of resources.
I like to just start my adventuring party out with a mortgage.
Yeah,
like
I've been brainstorming a list of things. So like a player in Telos, you pick or you roll on this table, and it's like you are massively in debt to this person. Your arm was horribly maimed and you can't do your trained profession anymore, right? So you need to pick up something different, right? I've been brainstorming a list of things like that so that right at the beginning of the game you start way behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the best example of that for me, and this has affected a lot, we should just roll up some Traveler characters at some point.
Yeah.
Because at the end of Traveler character creation, you most likely are starting with a ship, awesome, that you owe a ton of money on.
Yes.
Or
that's what I did for Fitting Sun.
Yeah.
I was starting like, you guys are upside down on your freighter.
Yeah.
That was the start of the campaign.
And when you muster out of things, it may be like, well, Richard, you had to leave the Navy because you lost a leg, but don't worry, the Navy gave you a new leg. But your benefits only paid for half of it, so you owe the Navy like 30,000 credits. Everyone in a Traveler game starts off with, why are we doing this? Oh, I know. I owe this much money to this gangster. I'm paying off my arm. This ship is going to get repoed in like 3 months if we don't make a payment on it. You immediately have buy-in.
And there's nothing that helps adults relax more
than debt management. Yeah, no, 100%. If you really want your players to feel right, that's why
you're talking about verisimilitude. You all have student loan debt.
Right.
You all have student loan debt.
This is why I argue that Han Solo is the point of view character in Star Wars. Because can any of us identify as, the chosen one? No, but you get to Han Solo and you're like, oh, this guy owes a bunch of money. His car's about to be repossessed, and he doesn't believe in all of this mystical stuff. Yeah, okay. I can identify with this guy because I have house debt. I owe money to people. I don't know what the hell the Force is. I think Han Solo is the point of view.
You have a very hairy friend who's a lot taller than you.
That's true. Richard is my Wookiee. I need to get that on a t-shirt.
I can't do Wookiee noises. I can't make Wookiee noises.
All right, so next month we're going to come back and we're going to talk about story management. We're going to talk about how to use all of these things that we've been talking about to really make a grand campaign come home, how to start your first session, how to end a grand campaign. So, gentlemen, thank you. I will see you all in a month for more grand campaign.
I apologize.
You'll be here in studio for this one.
For being so hyper. JM gave me so much coffee, and I had like more coffee before I came, so I'm just like,
don't worry about it. All right, welcome to this episode.